What would you do if the person you loved most not only betrayed you, but dragged your family into the chaos? My 7-year marriage was strong, until my wife's obsession with astrology led her to believe that my brother was her soulmate. She left me, and I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. What followed was a web of lies, manipulation, and deceit, exposing truths that shattered my trust and my world. This is the story of heartbreak, betrayal, and the fight for justice, because sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. It all started like any other routine evening in our 7-year marriage. You know the type. Comfortable silences, a favorite TV show humming in the background, and an unspoken agreement that life was steady. Then the pandemic hit, shaking up everything. My wife, always the grounded one, suddenly found herself drawn to astrology. At first, I thought it was harmless, a quirky escape from the chaos around us. Little did I know, those horoscopes and planetary charts were about to rewrite our lives. Her passion for astrology grew faster than I could comprehend. Within weeks, our once lighthearted conversations turned into heated debates about moon phases and star alignments. She seemed certain this newfound wisdom held the answers to everything. I laughed it off at first. After all, how much damage could some star charts really do? But soon, her obsession took a darker turn. Her daily decisions revolved around what her astrologer deemed favorable or inauspicious. Dinners were rescheduled based on Mercury's retrograde, and weekend plans revolved around eclipses. Our once solid partnership felt like it was slipping through my fingers, one constellation at a time. One night, as I sat alone in our quiet living room, I couldn't help but wonder, how had this spiraled so quickly? The woman I thought I knew seemed like a stranger, lost in a galaxy far away. And yet, deep down, I felt this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Her fascination quickly turned into a full-blown obsession. It was as if the stars had become her personal board of directors, calling the shots on every aspect of our lives. She wasn't just reading horoscopes anymore. She was living by them. Arguments erupted out of nowhere, dictated by the planetary alignments she meticulously tracked. It was baffling to watch her plan fights based on astrological warnings. I tried to be supportive at first, thinking this phase would pass. But soon, her decisions bordered on the absurd. She quit her stable job because her birth chart said it was a time for new beginnings. When I questioned her, she accused me of blocking her cosmic path. It wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. How do you reason with someone who's taking life advice from Jupiter? Her astrologer became a constant presence in our home, though I never met him in person. His voice echoed through her phone calls, dictating what days were good for financial decisions, or even which color she should wear. I wanted to scream, but instead, I watched in disbelief as she transformed every mundane moment into a celestial ritual. I kept telling myself it couldn't get worse, but every time I thought we'd hit rock bottom, she found a new way to surprise me. The stars, it seemed, were relentless, and as much as I hated to admit it, I could feel the cracks in our relationship growing deeper with each passing day. Then came the bombshell I never saw coming. One evening, she sat me down with an unsettling calm, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. Her astrologer, she explained, had uncovered a truth in her birth chart, one that apparently couldn't be ignored. My brother, of all people, was her destined soulmate. She said it with conviction, as though this revelation was as undeniable as gravity. I laughed at first. How could I not? The absurdity of it was overwhelming. But her expression didn't change. She truly believed it. My laughter died in my throat as her words sank in. She wasn't joking. This was serious, and she was ready to leave everything we'd built together, all because of some mystical nonsense a stranger told her. The betrayal hit me in waves. It wasn't just about her wanting to leave. It was who she was leaving me for. My brother, my flesh and blood. He was someone I trusted, someone I'd shared my life with. And now, he was part of this twisted cosmic narrative that tore through the fabric of my marriage. I felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. I didn't even know how to respond. My wife, The woman I thought I knew better than anyone was leaving me because the planet said so. I wanted to scream, to fight, to do something, but I just sat there, stunned as she packed her things. The emptiness of the room after she walked out was deafening. And yet, deep inside, I sensed there was more to this betrayal than the stars. The days after she left were a haze of disbelief and anger. My brother had always been my confidant, the one I could turn to when life got messy. And yet, here he was, embracing the role of her so-called soulmate without hesitation. His eagerness felt too convenient, too calculated. I couldn't shake the feeling that this betrayal wasn't just her doing. It was his too. I started replaying every interaction between them in my head, searching for signs I might have missed. Were they always this close? Did I ignore the red flags because I trusted them both so blindly? Each memory felt like a fresh wound, cutting deeper as the pieces slowly started to fit together. My brother wasn't just complicit. He was orchestrating something far bigger. The strangest part was how easily he dismissed my anger. When I confronted him, he acted as though this cosmic connection absolved them of any wrongdoing. He even had the audacity to say he was doing me a favor, that it was meant to be. His words felt like a slap in the face, a cruel reminder of just how little my trust had meant to him. I couldn't stop the questions from piling up. How long had they been planning this? Was the astrologer part of their scheme? The betrayal had layers I couldn't yet untangle. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a love triangle. It was a conspiracy. And I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. A year passed, though it felt like a lifetime. I'd buried myself in work, trying to forget the chaos, but the scars lingered. Then, out of the blue, she reappeared. A desperate knock at my door broke the quiet of an otherwise uneventful evening. I opened it, and there she stood, tears streaming down her face, clutching a tattered astrology book like a lifeline. Her words tumbled out in a frantic rush, barely making sense at first. She said she'd been manipulated by my brother, by the astrologer, by her own naivete. She admitted that this soulmate nonsense was nothing more than a clever lie, and now she wanted to make things right. As she spoke, I couldn't decide whether to laugh, cry, or slam the door in her face. Her explanation sounded sincere, but how could I trust her after everything? She claimed she'd seen through the deception, that she'd been used as a pawn in a twisted game. Yet, all I could see was the person who had walked out on me, leaving a wreckage I'd barely managed to crawl out of. Her pleas for forgiveness hit my ears, but my heart remained unmoved. I wanted to believe her, but the damage was done. My life had been torn apart, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to rebuild it with her. Still, her sudden return opened old wounds and reignited questions I thought I'd buried. Maybe this was her way of finding closure, or maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than she was letting on. Her confession lingered in my mind, stirring emotions I wasn't ready to face. But curiosity got the better of me. If she had been manipulated, as she claimed, then who was really pulling the strings? That's when I started digging, and what I found left me reeling. It wasn't just an innocent mistake or misguided belief. No, this was premeditated. The astrologer, the so-called cosmic guide who had turned our lives upside down, had been bought. My brother had bribed him to fabricate the soulmate nonsense, knowing exactly how much weight my wife placed on those readings. Every chart, every prediction, every word was carefully orchestrated to drive her away from me and straight into his arms. It was surreal. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was calculated, almost surgical in its precision. My brother had weaponized her beliefs against her, exploiting her vulnerability to satisfy his own selfish agenda. And the astrologer? He was nothing more than a puppet in this sordid scheme, profiting from our pain while playing the role of a trusted guide. I felt a mixture of rage and disbelief. How could someone I trusted so completely stoop so low? And yet, as the pieces came together, a grim realization dawned on me. This wasn't just about breaking my marriage, it was about control. My brother had played us both, and now I was left to decide what to do with the truth I'd uncovered. Armed with the truth, I couldn't just let it slide. I tracked down the astrologer, confronting him in his dimly lit office, a place that once held so much power over my life. He didn't even flinch when I stormed in. He just sat there, calm, as if my rage was just another client complaint. But I wasn't there for closure. I was there for answers. I laid it all out. The bribe, the fake charts, the manipulation. For a moment, he denied it, weaving excuses about cosmic misunderstandings. But when I mentioned legal action, his facade cracked. He admitted everything, spilling details of his arrangement with my brother. He'd been paid handsomely to craft the lies that tore my life apart. The betrayal had a price tag. Listening to his confession didn't bring the satisfaction I expected. Instead, it made everything feel heavier, more sinister. He tried to justify his actions, claiming he was only giving clients what they wanted. But I wasn't buying it. This wasn't about astrology or destiny. It was about greed, pure and simple. And he cashed in at my expense. Before I left, I made it clear this wasn't over. I wasn't just walking away with his confession. I was taking it to the authorities. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of his expression, a flicker of fear, maybe even regret. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The wheels of justice were finally turning, though I knew the real fight was still to come. Confronting the astrologer was one thing, but facing my brother was another beast entirely. I couldn't avoid it any longer. The moment I stepped into his house, I felt the tension crackling in the air. He greeted me like nothing had happened, his smug demeanor only fueling my anger. But I didn't come for pleasantries. I came for the truth. I laid out everything I discovered, each word hitting like a hammer. At first, he tried to deny it, but his feigned innocence didn't last. When I mentioned the astrologer's confession, his mask slipped, and what came next was pure venom. He didn't apologize. Instead, he doubled down, claiming he deserved my wife because she was better off with him. That was the breaking point. The argument escalated into shouting, words sharper than knives. And then, without warning, it turned physical. Years of buried resentment exploded as we grappled like strangers instead of family. I didn't recognize the man standing before me. This wasn't the brother I grew up with. Each punch, each shove, felt like a symbolic tearing of whatever bond we once shared. When it was over, we stood there, battered and breathless, but the damage was done. There was no going back. He'd not only betrayed me, but had also destroyed any chance of reconciliation. As I walked away, I realized that this wasn't just the end of our relationship. It was the end of the person I thought he was. The aftermath felt surreal. Filing charges against the astrologer wasn't just about revenge. It was about setting things right. The court battle that followed was long and draining, but in the end, justice prevailed. The astrologer was convicted for fraud. His reputation shattered along with his career. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was a start. As for my brother, he didn't escape unscathed. Word of his manipulation spread quickly, staining his name in ways no apology could fix. He lost credibility in his circles, his carefully curated image crumbling under the weight of his actions. Watching him face the fallout felt bittersweet. He wasn't behind bars, but the public disgrace was its own kind of punishment. My ex-wife, too, had her reckoning. Though I didn't rejoice in her suffering, she faced the consequences of her blind trust in the astrologer and my brother. She distanced herself from both and sought to rebuild her life. Part of me wanted to feel pity, but mostly I just felt relief. Her choices had set this entire disaster into motion, and now she was left to deal with the fallout. Despite these victories, the scars remain. Justice, I've learned, isn't about undoing the past. It's about ensuring no one else suffers the same way. And while the astrologer and my brother paid the price for their schemes, the damage to my life and relationships is something I'll carry forever. Still, I'm learning to live with it, one day at a time. As the dust settled, I found myself alone with my thoughts, grappling with the chaos that had upended my life. Betrayal has a way of rewriting who you are, reshaping your world into something unrecognizable. But as painful as it was, it also forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for years. I had to let go of the version of my life I thought was indestructible. Oddly enough, humor became my refuge. Looking back, the absurdity of it all The astrologer, the planets, my brother's ridiculous schemes gave me moments of bitter laughter. It wasn't that the pain disappeared, but laughing at the madness somehow made it feel smaller. Little by little, I started to reclaim pieces of myself, choosing to focus on what I could control. I realized that the blame didn't fall on the stars or the astrologer alone. It was a cautionary tale about what happens when we let extremes dictate our lives. Whether it's blind faith in cosmic charts or unshakable trust in family, nothing is immune to manipulation. That's a lesson I'll carry with me, though I wouldn't wish the experience on anyone. Now, as I move forward, I find myself strangely grateful. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it brought. I learned how resilient I can be, how humor can heal, and how to navigate the messy, unpredictable nature of life. And though I'll never look at an astrology chart the same way again, I know one thing for certain. I'm not looking back.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.